History has no memory. It's people who carry stories forward. Some are true. Some were true once. Some just need to be told. In tonight's episode, you decide, is this based on truth, or is it all a lie? Before we descend, take a moment to subscribe. And in the comments, tell us where you're listening from. Maybe you're huddled under polar bear blankets in the dead of the Arctic winter. Maybe you're swinging in a jungle hammock, all wrapped up like a snack. Or maybe you're alone in a quiet room. Or so you think. The Atlas leads us into forgotten towns. Strange ruins, lost souls, and impossible legends. Places that slip between memory and shadow. Now, dim the lights. Let the world grow quiet. And step with me into tonight's story. Story 1. The Boy Who Ate France. True or false? Part 1. The Hungry Child. A boy was born around 1772 beneath the slow skies of the Rhône Valley, in a France not yet broken open by revolution. The Rhône then was a land of wine and grain, of calloused hands, of long days bent beneath the sun. Today it's remembered for its endless lavender fields, rows upon rows sweeping over the hills in soft violet waves, thick with scent, as if the very air had turned to perfume. And for the bold, peppery wines of Côtes du Rhône, dark, sun-warmed, full of stone and smoke. Painters would come later, drawn by the light. Van Gogh came more than a century after, in 1888, living not far in Arles, where the air shimmered like glass over wheat. But in the boy's time, painters were rare. Hunger was not. Narrow footpaths twisted through golden wheat fields. Farmers in sun-bleached linen tunics swung scythes in slow arcs. In the village, the air smelled nothing like the lavender fields. There it was must and river mud, tinged with the faint iron scent of horses. Some villages had no books, no paper, no ink, because no one could read. News came only by gossip, or from travelling men who sold stories the same way they sold thread and soap, loudly, and for coin. These men arrived in creaking wagons painted with saints and sons. They wore faded military coats, or bright scarves from far-off ports, and called out headlines like prayers. The death of a king. A woman who birthed a calf. A priest struck down by lightning. People gathered in tight knots around them, coins pressed in palms, children straining between legs to hear. One sow for truth, two for a lie that danced better. Some stayed the night, in barns or the corner bed of an inn, trading stories for soup. Others vanished by dusk, heading to the next village before their tales cooled. Most local gossip fermented in taverns, low, timbered places where smoke pooled like fog, and wine was poured from goatskin sacks into chipped clay mugs. There was cider thick with pulp and cloudy piquette, rose-tinged or brownish depending on the barrel, a sour wine made from leftover skins. Men hunched together over stews of onion and root. They licked grease from their knuckles, whispering what they'd heard, or what they wished were true. Some say the boy came from a small commune near Lyon, though no record survives, not of his baptism, nor of his name. A child of peasants, and the peasants of the Rhône lived as close to the earth as the roots of their vines. Their homes were built of wattle and daub, slender wooden slats woven into lattice, packed with wet clay, dung and straw until it dried like bone. The roofs sagged under mossy tiles. Chickens sometimes slept inside. A pig might live underfoot, grunting at the hearth, until someone brought the axe. By candlelight, those squat tapers of beef tallow, bitter on the tongue and smoky as sin, children told stories of wolves in the forests, witches with blue fingers, and spirits who lived in the old wine barrels. The wolves were clever, they said. They walked on 2 legs when the moon was right. They took infants wrapped in linen, leaving only teeth marks in the snow. The witches lived at the edge of the marshes where reeds hissed and frogs fell silent. Their fingers were blue from cold or poison, and they whispered to birds who never sang again. And the barrels. Those held drunk ghosts, men who died mid-swig in the dark, slipping into lees and legend, still struggling as in life to crawl out of the casks. Sour, soaked, sealed in oak, not resting, not rising, just floating there, prune-skinned and pickled. Children played games with bones and string. They ran barefoot through soot-dark alleys, chased each other through smoke-thick streets, their laughter echoing off stone wells. It was a world lit by flame and ruled by appetite. While the boy's true name is lost, we know he had a nickname, a guttural corruption of the sudden bang made when a cork pops or a pot explodes, a word for rupture, for what happens when something can't be contained. But it wasn't the sound of his body breaking. It was the noise his hunger made when it finally touched air, like the snap of the world adjusting around a hole. They said his hunger began when he learned to chew, but others whispered that he'd screamed at the breast, that he clawed for milk and bit until blood came. Whatever the truth, by age 5 he could out-eat grown men. He devoured apples by the dozen, red Calville, Reinette du Canada, Belles de Boscoupe, sweet and soft-fleshed, sour and fibrous, fresh or spoiled. He'd climb orchard fences and vanish into the branches. The fruit disappeared down his throat, swallowed whole. He did not chew, he consumed, as if there were not a throat inside him, but a hole. He snatched loaves of rye and pan d'épi from windowsills, drank goat's milk straight from the teat, warm and foaming, until the goats kicked and screamed, licked grease from blackened firewood where meat had once dripped, bit into candles for the fat inside. And when no food was left, cats went missing, a short-haired mouser that earned its keep, a long-haired orange that wandered the alleys, a dog, or maybe a few. The stories disagree, but in the end they vanished. And he did not. By 12 he could eat a quarter of a cow in a single day, nearly 90 pounds of flesh, a boy no thicker than a broomstick seated beside the bones of an ox, eyes glazed, lips slick with marrow. Villagers brought scraps just to watch. It was spectacle, a grotesque curiosity. Still, his stomach was never quiet. After each feast, his belly swelled like a burial drum, round, stretched and tight. By morning it would shrink to a flap of empty hide, loose and wrinkled like an old wineskin. He sweated constantly. His skin reeked of rotting meat and vinegar. His breath was foul. His mouth hung open, drool spilling down his chin in ropes. His jaw seemed hinged like a snake's, and his teeth, chalky and cracked, looked as if they'd been worn down gnawing bone. People said he felt unfinished, that to look at him was to feel something in you resist. Not pity, not fear, just the knowledge that the mould hadn't set, that something had slipped out too early. His parents, broke and scared, sent him away before his 14th year. Maybe it was to save themselves. Others said it was to save him from what he might do. It's likely they gave him bread, a blanket, and locked the door behind him. Perhaps they warned neighbours not to let him in. Or perhaps they simply vanished one morning, leaving him to find the silence. He was not the only child on the road. France's orphan count was high. Hunger thinned the birth rolls, and swollen bellies emptied out villages. Vagrants wandered from town to town, children in tow or alone, with tin cups and hollow stares. So he wandered. He was never seen twice in the same village, or if he was, the chickens disappeared. From farmhouse to vineyard, from barn to roadside ditch, he slept with pigs. He foraged for frogs and rats. He drank from slaughterhouse troughs. He learned which fish bones could be swallowed whole. He sucked marrow from roadkill and stole from shrines. These were simple shrines, often built beside paths or crossroads. Stone ledges with iron bars, statues of the Virgin, ribbons pinned with prayers. Offerings were left, hard rolls, coins, cheese wrapped in cloth. Not out of wealth, but hope. He took them. He prayed, perhaps. Or perhaps he just ate. All around him France starved. Grain prices rose. Famine rolled in waves. But the boy's hunger wasn't political. It was older. Purer. Closer to the worms beneath the soil. They say you could hear him coming, his stomach gurgling like distant thunder, or like something trapped, trying to get out. Part 2. The spectacle. He wandered for years. No one counted them. Those years of alleys and hedgerows, wine cellars and pigsties. The world did not record boys like him. But in time he found a use. Not as a son, or soldier, or student, but as a show. France has always loved its freaks. Saints with stigmata, children born with second heads, women who bled on cue. In markets and fairs, people gathered to watch suffering dressed as spectacle. The thin line between horror and awe was just the width of a coin. The boy certainly had coins thrown at him, because all strange things, while feared, demanded value for their novelty in an otherwise bleak existence. Some say he began by dancing, barefoot on barrels, teeth clacking with castanets. Others say he only sat cross-legged on burlap sacks, staring into space until someone dared him to eat something. A candle, a rat, a pocket watch. And he did. He joined a troupe of charlatans, men with powdered wigs slicked to the skull, grease paint smeared on sagging faces. They called themselves physicians, philosophers, alchemists. One swore he could cure infertility with leeches. Another sold opium in bottles labelled vinegar of Saturn. They pitched tents striped in red and gold, with hand-painted signs hung crooked over rain-warped booths, each one louder than the last, each name more desperate to trap the eye. The living Moor, the swallowing child, Monsieur Monstre, the walking void, le dévoreur, the ox-eater, the boy who eats fire and bone, France's shame, France's wonder, the demon gullet, the flesh pit in pants, the chewer of candle and cat, the cask of hunger, the baby who ate his mother, the swamp with teeth, and always the same image. A painted boy, head tilted back at an impossible angle, mouth stretched wide, a whole pig, pink and screaming, vanishing past his teeth. He was billed as a marvel, a joke, a warning. They shouted his nickname, snapping it like a whip. The sound popped, hissed, drew breath. It was a bite of a word, and the crowd bit back. He ate anything they gave him. Cork stones, horseshoes, a live eel once, bitten in half, spine first. Handfuls of hot wax swallowed while still dripping. Coins, nails, a rosary. And he never choked, like a stone down an endless well. He is possessed, an old woman muttered once. He is punishment, said another. But the children laughed and pointed, and came back the next day. He lived off what the crowd gave him, Coins when they were generous, scraps when they were not. He licked clean the paper wrappers of roasted lamb, sucked marrow from festival bones, chewed discarded wax fruit until his gums bled. He slept behind stalls, in piss-soaked hay, in the hollows of broken statues. He was not quite man, not quite animal, just open. People began to follow him, not friends, not family, but watchers. A woman in Le Puy claimed to have seen him swallow a dozen eggs whole. A boy in Dijon swore he saw the boy vomit a live mouse, then eat it again. One farmer accused him of sucking yolks straight from hens' nests, leaving shells so clean they looked sculpted. He rarely spoke. When he did, his voice was hoarse, scratchy, like wind through dead trees, not from shyness, but from something deeper, like words were a language his body no longer needed. But still, he performed. He let the crowd prod his belly. He let a midwife insert her hand into his mouth, up to the wrist. He let a butcher wager he could feed him a whole calf heart, raw. The butcher lost. Once, in Rouen, a doctor offered him 12 francs if he could eat his way through an entire apothecary's drawer. The boy opened his jaw and began. He did not get sick. He did not die. He did not thrive either. He just kept going. The body adapted. His stomach, a stretched organ, more sac than muscle. His throat, a lubricated tunnel, his jaw able to distend like a lamprey. His skin, loose enough to be gathered in fists tied in knots, or stretched over bowls. His lips blistered, his eyes yellowed, but he smiled, because smiling made the coins fall faster. Still, there were days the troupe forgot him, days he wandered alone, a boy with nothing but a tin cup, and a stomach that seemed to have its own set of teeth. Was it hunger or performance? He began to blur the line. At a midsummer fair in Clermont, he offered to eat a full basket of apples, a sack of onions, and a raw snake. Then, for the finale, he swallowed a sword hilt. Not the blade, just the hilt. It protruded from his lips like a handle. He turned in place, arms wide. They clapped. And then he collapsed. Later, they said his body expelled things like a grave digger vomiting secrets. Coins, teeth, a lace glove, a child's spoon. No one could say what was planted, what was sleight of hand. The truth didn't matter anymore. Only the show. But a show cannot live forever. By 16 or 17, the boy's body began to fail. He fainted often. His legs buckled, his breath turned foul enough to stun insects. He begged for eggs, for liver, for entrails, not as tricks, as food. The troupe left him, or maybe he left them. Either way, he ended up in Lyon, filthy, starving, shivering with fever, and collapsed in the doorway of a hospital. They took him in. And in that hospital, for the first time, someone looked at him not as a marvel, but as a patient. That is where the experiments began. Blackout. Part 3. The Experiment. He woke up in a whitewashed hospital room, strapped to a straw mattress. He smelled vinegar, bleach, the sharp reek of piss and pus and old blood. A woman was screaming while pushing out a baby in another room. Somewhere, a surgeon was singing. They let him eat. Bread, soup, meat, barrels of plums. Still, he starved. The doctors were fascinated. They brought him pails of entrails and offal. He drank blood from bowls. He chewed cow's stomach until it burst between his teeth. He begged for more. They weighed him before and after each meal. One surgeon, doctor, Corville said it was like watching someone fill a well with snow. The boy would eat and bloat like a drowned pig, then sweat, twitch, sleep. When he awoke, the hunger returned. Dr. Corville called his colleagues. Soon the wards were filled with students, surgeons, and old men with medals. They fed the boy up to 16 meals a day, watching as his stomach rose like bread in an oven. They pulled open his jaw and stared down his throat. No answers came. When they cut him, his blood smelled sweet. When they weighed his shit, it came out nearly as fast as it went in. He was not digesting, he was transporting. So they began to test him. First, a live eel, slippery, black, coiled in a bucket. The boy grinned. He bit the head clean off, swallowed the rest whole. Then, a lizard, a snake, a small terrier. The dog squealed once. The doctors debated ethics, but the boy only watched, licking his fingers. They tested him with corks, stones, wooden spoons. He swallowed them all. Then, a wooden box. Inside it, a secret note, folded, sealed, and wrapped in waxed cloth. Could the boy be used to carry messages? Could he be a spy, a courier, uncatchable and unknowable? They gave him the box. He smiled, chewed once, swallowed. 3 days later, the box passed, intact. The note unread. The room went silent. One surgeon vomited. The boy laughed. His breath stank of bile and rust. He was sweating through the sheets, gnawing his own fingers. His stomach had turned black and blue. They fed him a golden spoon. He passed it 2 days later, gleaming. Part 4. The Mission. The army took him. It began as a favour. Doctor. Corville had friends among the generals and France was at war again. Revolution had spread like fire, enemies on all sides, spies everywhere. Our hungry hero was brought to a military outpost near Mainz. They gave him a uniform with brass buttons and a red sash. More costume than rank. They called him the courier, a secret weapon, a walking postbox, a stomach with legs. He stood among soldiers, sweating, trembling, mouth always slightly open. He could barely hold a musket, but that didn't matter. His weapon was internal. They fed him documents wrapped in oilskin, folded maps, messages laced with code. He swallowed them all. One night, they led him into the woods. The moon was red, the trees black with soot. He was given a final message, sealed, important, intended for a French colonel across enemy lines. He swallowed it, then walked into the dark, alone. They never trained him in espionage. They gave him no cover story. He couldn't read. He could barely speak German. He made it 20 miles before collapsing in a barn, begging for food. A farmer called the Prussians. They searched him, found nothing, held him in a cell for 2 days, waiting. Eventually he passed the package. They read the message. It was nonsense, a decoy, a test. The army had never intended him to succeed, but the Prussians were not amused. They dragged him into a forest clearing, bound his hands, prepared the noose. The boy wept. At the last moment, the rope was lowered. He was beaten instead, whipped, starved, mocked, then released. He stumbled back to the French lines, his uniform torn, his gums bleeding. Something inside him had snapped. When he reached the hospital, he begged the doctors to cure him. He said he would do anything. I will stop eating, he told them. Please, remove the hunger. They tried laudanum, vinegar, wine, a diet of soft-boiled eggs and salt-cured meat. He vomited it all. They fed him more offal. He licked the bowl. That night, a hospital patient went missing. A child. The doctors turned away, and no one spoke his name for a long, long time. Part 5. The end. They didn't expel him. They just stopped looking him in the eye. He was moved to the far end of the hospital in a separate wing, a former monk's cell where the windows didn't open and the walls bled salt. They brought food on trays and slid them through a hole in the door. Sometimes it wasn't food, sometimes it was a bucket of blood, sometimes a carcass left in a sack. No one wanted to touch him anymore. The nurses spoke of the smell, not the stench of unwashed skin or open wounds, or the meat he devoured raw. This was worse. Sweet, wet rot, like syrup poured over a corpse. He coughed through the nights. Spasms racked his chest. They opened him up. Dr. Tessier, who had replaced Corville, convinced him to undergo an exploratory surgery. The boy agreed, begging only for more laudanum. They found ulcers across his stomach, ringed in pus. His liver was blackened, his intestines distended and coiled like overfilled sausage. They said his esophagus was scarred with teeth marks. His own. The boy died the next day. They buried him behind the hospital, under a weeping cypress, in a grave marked only by a stone. Years later, when Tessier described the autopsy, he said, "No human should have endured such a body." And yet, he had lived. Until he didn't. Was it true? Or just a well-told lie? Tell us what you believe in the comments, and why. We know many of you listen late at night, sometimes while trying to fall asleep. Let us know where you're listening from, and whether this story kept you awake or gave you good dreams. And one more thing. If you know a rare or hidden place, a ruin, an old legend or a forgotten town you'd like us to cover, share it in the comments. Your suggestion might become part of the Atlas. If you enjoyed wandering these forgotten corners, subscribe and join us again next time for another journey into the unknown.